could marry her brother-in-law. Then the Gemara had the opposite shaila, which is there an amonos if the Edom is saying that her brother-in-law died, to now make her mutter l'shuk. Let's say her brother-in-law was only of him. Will there be an amonos? Will there be an amonos? I'm sorry? The rest of the Gemara says, "Kum she'edim." So we're going to learn the Tosfos, who says that could be she hated him is a much starker time. So we have to put Tosfos inside because it's such a geschmack in Tosfos. That's right. That's right. If you look, if you take a poll, right? If you take a poll of how many women have a cheshik for their brother-in-law versus how many women hate their brother-in-law, you probably get a much bigger response on those women who hate their mother-in-law. But the Tosfos tells us another very important thing. So let's go back to 3 lines from the bottom of Tzadik Gimel and Beis. Kisa Boilach. The question we would have as to whether or not there'd be such an amonis is Lamishri Yevamos la'alma. So we know the husband died, and the question is there a surviving brother-in-law? And the Erechot says that the surviving brother-in-law died, thereby releasing this woman l'shuk. My time of Erechot. Why do we believe in Erechot? Mishum the Milsa David l'gluya le'mishaker, and Erechot's not going to lie when he knows the truth is going to come out. And Tosfos already explained to us yesterday that Avada, we're taught we rely on Daiku Mitzvah. But the question is, do we need a really high-grade Daiku Mitzvah, or you just need a lower-grade Daiku Mitzvah to supplement the 8? Or is the main focus of the heter because of the Daiku Mitzvah? So do you say the main thing is the 8, and therefore, since it's Avida Lagluya, the 8 won't lie? And even though there's a compromised Daiku Mitzvah, that's fine because we still have the strong raya of Deirechad. Ideal time of Deirechad is because Deirechad does nothing. All he does is he's a catalyst to make her look into it. But the whole Namonis is because she's looking into it. It should be Daiku Mitzvah. The whole Daiku Mitzvah, she's not going to check so much to make sure her brother-in-law died. The Misna who the Sanile, because she can't take his guts. And because of that, she will be easier to allow herself to marry Lashuk. She will be easier to pronounce her brother-in-law dead. So we have to look at Tosfos, who explains to us how human nature works. So I'm not going to learn from the beginning. Okay, it's a couple of lines. There's a stronger taina to say that she's not going to check in as much before she says her brother-in-law died. Mishum the sanilay, because she hates him. Even though we just came up with svara, where we were poished that you could trust her, and the fact that she likes her brother-in-law won't ruin her investigation. Nevertheless, mishum the sani shavka tvei, hatred will motivate her much stronger than maybe having the hearts for her brother-in-law. And this is my favorite line. Shegedola sinis hasaynais me'ahavas ayahavas. Everyone knows when you love somebody, okay, that pushes you to a certain level. But when you hate somebody, there's no limit to what you're going to do. I love Tosfos. I love Tosfos when he puts his finger right on human nature. Kavalti. Now, Tosfos gives other reasons. We also know that it's much more likely for her to hate her brother-in-law than it is for her to like her brother-in-law.
More likely. Somewhere in the middle, there's not one more than the other. Isn't that more than the other?
Yeah, it could be. As long as there's a chance. There's a chance that she will compromise her investigation. Of all places where it tells you that the wife will hate her brother-in-law, it's in Perika Isha Shalom. It's also much worse for a woman when she falls to her brother-in-law to Yibum, when she hates him, a woman is in a much worse predicament if she's falling into the hands of a Yavim who has complete control over her release than if she just falls for a brother-in-law she likes. Even if she wants him, she doesn't have such a great benefit if she falls to Yibum to him. You know why? He might not want her. Ich will sie nicht, right? And even if he does do Yibum, She's still not so happy. Not just other men like him. In other words, you can never make a woman happy. No matter what you give her, she's still not happy. Right? She could also, I could have found someone better than you. So why didn't you take him, pal? Right? If the woman says I could have got someone better than you, you tell her back. Why? So then why didn't you take him? Right? But if she hates him, then if she hates him, she can't on her own decide to marry somebody else. Unless he releases her with chalitza. If she falls to she's stuck, she's trapped. Therefore, so once again, the Gemara revives the Shaila if we need to be concerned that she'll compromise her investigation. Gewaltig. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's see what the Halakha Gemara says. So the Gemara brings a similar ride to what we brought just a moment ago. Amalu Rav Sheshes, Tini Suah. This is also in our Mishnah. Amrullah, our Mishnah says, Amrullah meis bailecha. They said first your husband died, v'yachach meis bincha, which means you are mutter l'shuk, you're not muchiv in yibum. Then this is, and in fact, you married a man from the shuk. V'yachach Amrullah chilaf advarim, chilaf hayu advarim. Then they said, oops, you were really muchiv in yibum. So then Teisei bavlad rishon v'achven mamzer. She's a Yevamos l'shuk who married, so she has to get divorced. And if you remember, we said, why is the vlad a mamzer? Because our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Kiva, who holds that yesh mamzer mechayv elav. So hechadami. Let's drill down a little bit to understand the details of this case. If two Edom originally came to say testimony that she was mutter l'shuk, and now two Edom are saying she needs chalitza or yibum, my chozes the samchas ahani smoy chahani, similar to the Ketani we had earlier. Who said you believe in these two Edom? It's trey levahad trey. But mamzer, why would you call this child a mamzer? Suffolk mamzer who? He's only a Suffolk mamzer. I'm sorry? Exactly. At this point. And if you want to say that the Mishnah means Suffolk mamzer, the Mishnah is not being perfectly accurate, we'll have a raya that the Mishnah is being perfectly accurate. And we the Ketani say for Harishan mamzer. But Achron any mamzer, Shemami no, the Dafka Ketani. The Tan is not throwing around terms like mamzer easily. The Tan is being very precise. Alalab Chad, the only way we can explain this, why you listen to the second Edom over the first set of Edom, is because there were no first set of Edom. It was only an Edecho, the Chatchila, who was mater her l'shok. The timer, the also by Trey, and the only reason why now we're telling her to divorce, that she has to get divorced, and her child's a mamzer, is because two Edom came later on to say that in fact she was mechuyev in Hebrew. Akashua, halavachi, but before the second set of Edom came, we let her get married, Mehemet. So you see clearly that we allow a Yevamos l'shuk based on the testimony of an Eid Echad. So it's not a raya. Trey. If it's trey, you're going to ask the kasha, why does he have to put her, divorced her? Who said you should be soymech hahani, maybe smoy hahani? The second Edom didn't come along and say, we saw for sure that the son died before the father. No, they said, you guys say that you saw the father die before the son? How could you have said that? You were with us in Barbados that day, so you have no idea who died first. That's how we would understand the Mishnah. But it's trey, so therefore you don't have a raya that an Eid Echad could be Neman to be Mater or Yevamos l'shuk. Amalei of Mordechai l'Ravashi, Amalei of Adal l'Ravashi. Tashma, let's try bringing a different raya. Ein ha'isha ne'menes leimer meis Yevami. A woman is not believed to say, my brother-in-law died, and therefore, Sheinose, I could now go and marry any man in the shuk. I'm a regular almana. She's also not believed to say, and a woman is not believed to say that my sister died, and my sister happened to be married to my brother-in-law, to her husband, and now that she died, I can go and take her husband. She's not believed to say if she comes in tinius that my sister died, so therefore my brother-in-law is allowed to marry me. She's not believed. That's So fact Gemara, hi nihi the light nehemna. She is not believed. He needs the light nehemna. The Brisa says dafka she's not nemenis without any other type of support. Ha-erechot, we could be medayik that if an erechot came, Nehemon, it would be believed that he would be allowed to marry his wife's sister. Fact Gemara, if you're going to consider this Brisa meduyak, that you could make such a diak, ha-erechot nemon, look at the sefer. It says, "Eino ish nemon loymar meis achi." A man is not believed to say, "My brother died," and that will allow him to marry his brother's wife, his brother's mother. And he's not nemon to say that he killed his wife, that his wife died, so that he could marry her sister. So once again, based on your logic of making such a diak in the ratio, let's try making this same diak in the sefer. Who knew the mehem? He himself wouldn't be believed. Are you going to suggest that an erechad would be neman? Avadi, that's ludicrous to suggest. Because b'ishlam agabe isha, why by an isha do we trust an erechad? Mishum igina ikila barabana. Let's not forget and throw away all our rules. All our rules were always in the them. There was a special heter by a woman to say that her husband died because of iguna, but this doesn't apply to a man. There's no suggestions, no havamina that an erechad should work. So Alvada, you cannot be medayik from this Mishnah, sign the Reisha and sign the Sefer that an erechad would be neman. So Oibazoi, the main chiddush of this Mishnah is the Ikar Halacha itself, that there's no nemanus for the Isha to be mater herself, and there's no nemanus for the Ish to be mater himself. We need a chiddush because of Rabbi Akiva. Why? It's all kedai chamina. A Yevamos l'shuk is merely a chayv elav. So kedai chamina. Hoyel v'omer Rabbi Akiva yesh mamzer mechayv elaven. Since Rabbi Akiva said that there's a mamzer mechayv elaven, meaning it's a gewaltig avera for a woman who's a Yevama to marry l'shuk. It's such a big avera. It's such a great kilkul. Her children will be mamzerim. Eima chaysha akal kula. Maybe this woman won't want to do such a horrible avera. Bishlam, according to the other Tanoim who hold Ein Mamzer Mechayv Elavin, yeah, obviously we shouldn't trust her, because if she wants to marry her brother-in-law, she'll say she fell evil. Or forget it, if she wants to marry Lashuk, she'll say her brother-in-law died. So we can't trust her. But according to Rabbi Akiva, which is a very chamer dekavera, v'haraya, such a union will create a mamzer. Maybe then you could trust her because of her fear of the chomer or isser, according to Rabbi Akiva. Kamash Malon, that you still could not trust her. This Akalkula Desira, the Bach takes out, and if you see, there's a very long Rashi here that says the pshat how I learned that it just Kalkula, and he slugs up very vociferously the second shot where she's worried about her children. She must have been a lamdan. I know you might have thought that I'm a lamdan, and I know Rabbi Kiva holds the mamzer, and therefore I'll be very careful. Kamash Malon. Kamash from the what? That she's not concerned that she's not such a lamdan. But I will tell you, there was a case at the time of Rabbi Kiva where a woman went to Din Torah, and she had a migli of an amonus because she could have tinied something that only a massive Talmud Chacham would know. So they tinied to Rabbi Kiva. How could you believe this woman with such a migli? The whole word of a migli is, if I wanted to lie, I could have said a better time. She couldn't have said a better time because she would have never thought of it in a million years. So Rabbi Kiva, when it comes to money, everybody's a Talmud Chacham. Everybody can figure anything out. That's right. Rav Amar, Rav says, Eid Echad Nemen b'Yevamos mikavachim. But Rav wanted to say that an Eid Echad should be Neman to tell us, so we have not yet been pushed to Shaila. Our Shaila was when an Eid Echad be Neman to say that a woman could marry Lashuk and there's no Yevama here. So he's Neman because of a kavachim. Let's think about it. L'Isser Karis Hitarta, if we free a woman who is an Eshes Ish, and if she marries another man, there's an Isser Karis, or there's an Isser Misa, there's an Isser Chenek. Yet we trust Eid Echad, L'Isser Lav, for an Isser Lav like Kol Shekain. If she's going to marry Yevamos Lashuk, that's only an Isser Lav. So Madach and Eid Echad has an amonus to be matter a Isser Chomer. Surely a Eid Echad should have an amonus to be matter an Isser Kal. Amalei Hahume Rabban LaRava, Someone told Rabbi, how are you talking? That's not a good svar at all. That's faulty logic. Because he atzma teichiach. Look at her herself. The le'isser kares he tarta. If she's saying Edus that her husband died, you're mater her l'shuk. There's the nisser kares. L'isser lav loy tarta. Yet l'isser lav is not mater. So if anything, the logic is punkverkehr. The more chomer it is, the more nemah she should have. So your svar is not a good svar. My time aloy mehemna. Why is she not believed herself? Why is she not believed herself? Even the zibin the son-in-law. Since sometimes she doesn't like her brother-in-law. Therefore, she's not believed to say her brother-in-law died. So therefore, like daika mitzvah. Even the zibin the son-in-law daika mitzvah. And in fact, we require her verification. We're not relying on the aid because we have two tzodim to the shaila. Is the main among us the aid because it's a milsa davita legluye, or are we relying heavily on the isha daika mitzvah? So you have a right from here that we're relying heavily on the isha daika mitzvah, and therefore we cannot be mater a woman to marry Lashuk that her Yavam died based on the testimony of Bnei Echad. We don't have a right. Gewaltig. Now, this takes us to the very last line of the Mishnah, a very easy line. Let's just quickly. Oh, a very easy line. That's a TD. That's a TD term. Correct. Mechumer, but it's a suffer, right? The Gemara blah blah. So what is the last line of the Mishnah? Zu darish Rabbi Elazar ben Masya. This is on Tadik Beis Amar Aleph. It says v'isha gerusham isha v'loy meisha in isha. If she gets a get that she doesn't need at all. So in our Mishnah's case, the context was that she thought her husband died. She accepted kedushin from another man, and now her husband shows up. No bia was done. No severe isser was done, and therefore she doesn't need to get from the second husband because the kedushin was never taken. But even if the second husband gives her a get, it doesn't passel her from kahuna because it's not a get at all. Because if you get a get from your husband, Zakta Pasuk, that's when you're a grusha and you're also to marry a kohen. But if someone in the shuk, a total stranger, comes and gives you a get, that has no impact whatsoever. Zakta Heilige Gemara. Zakta Heilige Gemara. Zakta Heilige Gemara over here. Zeh Medrash Dor Rabbi Elazar Masha. Amar Rabbi Amar Ab. Hava Leila Rabbi Elazar leMedrash Ber Marganisa. Rabbi Elazar had an opportunity to darshan a much more beautiful pshat, b'darsh bechaspa, and he settled for a mediocre pshat, like he darshan. My Marganisa, what extra special diamond? I believe a Marganisa is a pearl. Could he? Is that what he said? Pearl? What could he? Hearing it from Duvi is not such a riot because by Duvi a pearl is better than a diamond, right? Duvi gave away a diamond to get a pearl, right? But by everybody else, you don't say that. The Darsh Bechasba, my Marganisa. So what is this pearl? The Tanya it says Beisha Gerusha Meisha, Afilu Aniskarsha Ela Meisha. Even if she's owing this garsh from her husband, Psula Lukun. What does that mean? What if someone says Harayat Nugareshus with this get, but you're not gonna you're so she getting a get, right? But at the end of the day, that's still called a get. Behind you get the post of Lukun. So what if someone tells his wife Harayat Nugareshus, but you're also to everybody? That's a get, and then he dies. So that it doesn't. It's not matter hurt anybody. Exactly what it is. It's a reich again. It's not even a t'nai. He didn't say almanash she'einat mutul chaladim. Says this get is only get to separate you from me, but this get will not be matter you l'shuk. It's a joke. It's a joke. But nevertheless, it's called a reich get. It's called right. So it's called a reich get. It's called a reich get. And if this man dies, then she's still also to marry a kohen al tabush. You are allowed to put a t'nai on the get, but not a t'nai that lasts forever, that will not be severed, because it has to be something that eventually she will be completely severed. Josh Frankel told me the reason why it's called a get, because the letter Gimel and Tes are the only two letters that you will never find together in Aleph Tanakh. The Vilna Gaon says it?
I guess the second one to get pushed, to get this, to get on the start,
Right. Right. The word would get used for star as well. That's right. Because let's think more about it. The Heilige Mishnah, after the Mishnah, have the Dalar Amanal. Here we're going to see the opposite case.
Somebody says it's right. And I had Gitach on the last.
Now, Anas, the Iat Muteres L'chaladam.
Second, he says Haraya Gitach. She's cut off. Basically, if he doesn't say on the last, what's the thing?
He said Harayat Mugreshes Mimeni, the Iat Muteres L'chaladam. That's what he said.
What if
if it's all Teichid Dibur, it's one deeper. But I guess we'll get up to there Mesechus Gittin. So we'll get up. We have to go back to. We have a blot to finish. We'll have to get up. We'll have to look at it in Mesechus Gittin.
Is she divorced or not?
Of course not. Yeah, it's not a good get. But it's called a Reich get, the Shmek from a get, which will answer her Lakuna. But Avad, it's not a good get.
And the Reich get is on the toilet.
I think we had psukim. I don't know if it's the Reich or Rabban, but I think we had psukim about Reich get. But I don't remember. It's a good question. I don't know. So let's see the Mishnah. Misha hocha ishtoi l'medina hayam. What happens if exactly who said only the man goes on a business trip? His wife went on a business trip, right? Bo v'amrulai, and then they came back and told him, Meisa ishticha, your wife died on her business trip. So now he's allowed to marry his sister-in-law. V'nasa esha chaysa, and then he went and married her sister, his sister-in-law. The achach bas ishtoi, and then his wife catches him. His wife comes back and says, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" So the halacha is muteres lachserloi. He is allowed to take his wife back. You see, it's a man's world. It's a man's world. A man does not become usher to his wife. We're soon going to see maybe he does. But a man does not become usher to his wife if he crosses her. So she could go back if she takes him back, of course. He could take back his first wife. Umuter b'kroiv. The kedushin was not typhus on his wife's sister because she was usher to him within Issachar. So therefore, all of her relatives are mutter to him because he was never married to her. Ushniya, and in fact, the sister-in-law, Muteres B'Kreva, would be allowed to marry any one of his relatives because there was never a marriage. The Mesa, Rishona, what if now his wife dies? Mutter B'Shniya, he's allowed to go back and marry his wife's sister because now she's mutter to him. How about Amrullah Mesa Ishta? They told him that his wife died, and he went and married her sister-in-law, his sister-in-law, her sister. When you married your sister-in-law, at that point your wife was still alive. So that was a chayv krisus. But now your wife really did die. So now you're mutter to your sister-in-law. So the halach is avlad rishon mamzer, the child that was born while his wife was still alive, was born through a bia of a chayv karetz, of a chiv karetz. So the child's a mamzer. Or achron in a mamzer, but any children born after the point that his wife died would not be a mamzer. Yes. Rabbi Yosy says something very cryptic that the Gemara is going to explain tomorrow. Kol shepoisel al yedei acherim, poisel al yedei atzmoi, v'chol she'ein poisel al yedei acherim, ein poisel al yedei atzmoi. Like Rashi says, the Gemara Mefarish law, it's a bit complicated. That's putting it mildly. So we'll wait to the Gemara to get to there. So the should have a good night's sleep tonight, because tomorrow we're going to learn a little bit of a complicated chocolate battalion. Zok to the Gemara. The Alpha Gav. What happens if it's more of a complicated case? His wife didn't go on the business trip by herself. What happened was his wife was married to him, and he had a sister. His wife's sister was married to let's say his name is Chaim Yankel. His sister-in-law is married to Chaim Yankel, and the other Ishtoi Begisei Lebnisiyam. His wife went on. They wouldn't go on vacation. They went on business. His wife went on a business trip. His wife went with his sister-in-law's husband. This is like a shtickle, like a wife swapping. But he sent his wife with his wife's sister's husband. So he's stuck at home with his wife's sister, and his wife went with his wife's sister's husband on this business trip. Now, in such a case, if he lived with his sister-in-law, so her sister-in-law, when his brother-in-law and his wife come back, now his sister-in-law is usher to her husband because she was an Eshes Ish Shizinsa, right? So it's not fair that Hani Nisuin the Kamitzura Eshes Gisoy Agisoy, this wife swapping caused that his sister-in-law is now usher to her husband. Afilu Achi Eshes Gisoy Asira, his sister-in-law is usher to her husband, but Ishtoy Sharia, but his wife will be mutter to him. So look at that. He had this little tryst, and it caused havoc to his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, but he goes back, Shalom Aleichem, he can marry his wife as if nothing happened. We don't say, we don't say, since in this transaction, it caused his sister-in-law to be usher on her husband, so therefore we should also usher his wife on him. We don't say that. No, because his wife didn't have relations with the brother-in-law. No, the people who went on the vacation, they were ehrlich and sneezing. The people at home had the party. Right? So it's other. At home, everything was at home is where the trouble happened. Out there, wherever the business trip was, everything was kosher v'yosher. They had separate hotel rooms. Zog to Gemara, Lema Mastisin like Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva would have held that it's also usher for him to marry his wife, for him to take his wife back. You have a kiva, it would be achos kerushas. Why would it be achos kerushas? Because the Tanya we learned, kol arayis sha'amru, we had the same brayso before, ain tzricha semenu get. Arayis don't need a get because kedushin is not toifus. Chutz me'eshes ish shenisses al pi bezdin. We already said if an Eshes Ish gets married al pi bezdin, she has to be get. And if you remember, we had a very big shaila. If this applies only if she got married with one aid or two aidim, it was totally the machlokes from Shimon and the Rabbanon. But Rabbi Kiva Moshe, Rabbi Kiva says, you know who else needs a get? Af Eshes Ach v'chaysisha, which means that if you're married, if you illegally have relations with a chaysisha, so in this case, the husband had illegal relations with his wife's sister because he thought that his wife had died, right? So he has to give his wife's sister a get. Just like the second husband has to give a get when a woman got married thinking that her husband died. Dr. Bakiva, if a man had relations with his wife's sister because he thought his wife died, he actually has to give her a get. Once he gives her a get, she now has the status of Girush Yosy. It's not a get Midaraisa. Kedusha wasn't Chal. But Rabbi Kiva holds that Mechumah, he has to give her a get. If you have to give her a get, come to Chai, she's Girush Yosy, which means his wife is Achos Girush Yosy. The sister of your Grusha, as long as she's alive, is also to you. So therefore, according to Rabbi Kiva, that holds in this case he would have to give his wife's sister a get, that automatically answers him to his wife because his wife becomes a Chos Girush Yosy. Everything's going to win. Yeah. Yeah.
Who has to give the gift? The guy that stayed at home?
The husband stayed at home with his wife's sister.
They didn't do anything.
No, they did do something. They had relations. His wife didn't have any relationship with the brother-in-law. He was the troublemaker. They were fine. So Nibalti had relations with his wife's sister. She becomes usher on her husband because she's an Eshes Ish Shezinsa. But he has to give her a get according to Rabbi Kiva, which now she's Girush Yosy. So his wife now becomes Achos Girush Yosy.
If he doesn't allow it, but he has to give a get for condition, not for alliance.
He made kedushin. We're talking about he made kedushin. Yeah. So Zog the Gemara, Bechiv and Damar Rabbi Kiva boy get. Once Rabbi Kiva says that he has to give his wife's sister a get, Memela Itzer Alei. Now his wife becomes usher to him to have a law. So Zog the Gemara, according to Rabbi Kiva, this wouldn't stem. Because according to Rabbi Kiva, he would not be able to stay married to his wife.
It's worse. He married his sister-in-law than if he would have been desired.
Without doing the kedushin. Yeah. And you're going to see in a second. In fact, the Gemara, the exact point that you make, the Gemara makes. V'lav itmer Allah. Didn't we learn on Rabbi Kiva clarifying Rabbi Kiva's words? Amar Rab Gidel, Amar Rab Kiva Yosef, Amar Rab, Hai Eshesach Heichidami. When did Rabbi Kiva say you need to give a get to your wife's sister. That's only going to Kiddush Achiv Isha v'halach leMedina Sayyam. No, right. So there were two cases where Rabbi Akiva said, "Boy, get the case of Eshes Ach and the case of the Choshisha." Right? Right? So let's analyze one of the two cases. Kiddush Achiv Isha. My brother was Makadosh a woman. He didn't make Nesuin. There was no Bia. He just made Kedushin. V'halach leMedina Sayyam. And he went leMedina Sayyam. V'shama Shemei Sachiv. And the brother at home found out that his brother died, which would be without children, which would be Mechayev, his brother's wife in Yibum. But Amad B'Nosas Ishtoi, he went and made Bia on the wife. So Amri, we say, in Amri Inchi, why do we require a get? Why do we require a get? The Maisa, when this person married his brother's wife, Kedushin wasn't typus. It was Eshes Ach, Shaloi B'Makam Mitzvah. So why don't you give a get? The teretz is because people might say, the Amri Inchi, Hach Kama, the first brother didn't make Nesuin. He never was boiled this woman. He only made Kedushin, and then he went to Medina Sayyam. Tanoah Havalei Kedushin. He probably made a Tanai in his Kedushin, whatever it was, that was not fulfilled. And in fact, there was never a marriage between the brother who died and this woman. And therefore, Bahai, so when his brother married this woman, Shaper Nosif, it's a bona fide marriage. And that's why Rebbe Kiva holds you have to give a get. Because people will mistakenly think that the second union was a kosher marriage. Because the first union was not. Bahai Achaisisha Nami. And therefore you could say the same thing in our case with the Chaisisha. Hechadami, Kajakidish Isha, this brother-in-law was Makadish, this woman, his wife's sister, right? V'halcha leMedina Sayyam, and then she went leMedina Sayyam. V'shama, so let's just take a regular case. A man made kedushin on a woman, and the woman went to Medina Sayyam. V'shama Shamesa, and he heard that this woman died. Amad v'nasa sachaisa. Then he married her sister, thinking that his first wife died, but he only made kedushin on his first wife. So there, once again, the Amri Inchi people will say, he probably made a Tanai in the Kedushin, and therefore the Tanai wasn't fulfilled. And therefore, when he married the second sister, it was a good Kedushin, but Shaper Nosef, and that's what he needed to get. El Nesuin, but if he actually made Nesuin, me equal a Maimer, no Havale Nesuin, a person will make a Tanai in the Kedushin. You know why? Because he gave her a ring, and if the Tanai doesn't get fulfilled, he gets his ring back. But if a guy made a Nesuin, that means he was boiler. No one's going to make a Tanai if there's Nesuin, because he doesn't want to retroactively make his Bia into a Bia Snus. So therefore, if there's Nesuin, there's no chance of that. Our case is speaking where everyone was Nesua. So in our case, there's no chance in the world that you need a get. So in our Mishnah's case, you wouldn't need a get. So for the Gemara, how could you say that according to Rabbi Kiva, according to Rabbi Kiva, you would need a get, and therefore your wife is also to you because of a chois gerushasai. Your wife, you wouldn't need a get. Your sister, you wouldn't have to give your sister-in-law a get because your brother-in-law was Mesua to her. He wasn't just Mekudeshes to her. He wasn't just a Kedushin. So therefore, even Rabbi Kiva holds, B'chai Gavna, you don't need to give a get because no one's going to think that your Kedushin was valid because everyone knows that she was married to somebody else. So therefore, no get is necessary. So once again, you don't have you cannot tell me that this Mishnah does not stand with Rabbi Kiva. Rather, even Rabbi Kiva would agree to this Mishnah because in this case, no gittin would be required. So once again, although my sister-in-law is usher to her husband because she was an Eshes Shazinza, the wife is mutter to the husband because there's nothing wrong. There was no problem with that, and no get was required. Amalei Rab Ashi.
The Kiva said that you need to get because people will think.
Correct, but by Nesuin, no one will think, because no one will think that someone was boil a woman on the Tanai, because that someone won't want to do. So Amalei Rab Ashi L'Rav Kahana, Rabbi Kiva, you want to say it's going according to Rabbi Kiva, right? Because you said that even Rabbi Kiva holds no get. According to Rabbi Kiva, the Mishnah could have added another case. Listening to Chamoisa. What would have been the case with Chamoisa? His wife went to Medina Sayyam. He was told that his wife died, and then he went and lived with Chamoisa. Oh, so Madi Yasser, there's going to be a big machlokes that we're about to uncover as to whether or not the Isra Chamoisai is like the Isra Chaisai, and it only applies while your wife is alive. You're not allowed to marry your mother-in-law. But maybe after your wife dies, you are allowed to marry your mother-in-law. Or maybe you're not allowed to marry your mother-in-law even after your wife dies. You're not allowed to marry your mother-in-law. So there is such a shayla. That's exactly what we're going to get into.
With condition or only with condition?
Even with condition.
Are we ever chayshish that a guy wants to marry his mother-in-law?
That's already a different story. It's going to get worse. We're going to bring his mother-in-law's mother in the picture too. The Baba comes along for the ride. So let's see what the Gemara says. So Rabbi Akiva listening Nami Chamoisai would have been a perfect example to have in our Mishnah, because we're going to illustrate that Rabbi Akiva, according to one Shita, holds that Chamoisai is only usher to you while your wife is alive. We have a Shita that holds that Chamoisai la chamisa. Once one's wife dies, Rahman al-Islam, there's no Isser Shreifa, there's no Misab Shreifa. Normally, if someone lives with his mother-in-law, he gets Shreifa and she gets Shreifa. But we're going to show that there's a Kushita who understands Rabbi Akiva that there would be no Misas Shreifa if someone lived with his mother-in-law after his wife died. The Tanya we learned. The Lashon HaPasuk of Chamoisai is the Eish Yishrefu Oisai V'Esen, him and them. So what does Oisai, him and them mean? Oisai V'Es Achas Mehen, him and one of those, and one of the two women. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Now, right off the bat, there's no svara to say that his wife should get killed. His wife did nothing wrong at all, right? What did she do wrong? She's the innocent woman who was cheated on. But Rabbi Shmuel learns, Oisai V'Esen, hen, in some language means one. So Oisai V'Esen means him and her, they both get killed. That's how Rabbi Shmuel understands this passage. Rabbi Kiva means Oisai V'Shtein. Esen means if he slept both with his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother, they're both chayiv shreif, because the Isser Shreifa goes back 2 generations. And the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shmuel also holds that it goes back 2 generations. But it's not from the actual Lashon HaPasuk that you see that. We learn it from a different place. So Bishlam Allah Bayi Domer Mashmoyis Darshan Ikabenayu. According to Abayi, the Machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, they both agree that there's shreifa for the mother-in-law. They both agree there's shreifa for the mother-in-law's mother. The whole question is how you know that Allah. From Rabbi Akiva, you know Minei Ubei from the pasuk Oisai V'Shtein. Rabbi Shmuel, you learn it from another place. Rabbi Shmuel said Chadaksiv. Only one lady, meaning the mother-in-law, is mentioned directly in the pasuk. The mother-in-law's mother we learn from another limud. Rabbi Akiva said Taitiksiv, and Rabbi Akiva says that both are in the parsha. Shaper makes sense because based on this understanding, which is how Abaya learns, even after your wife dies, you're still not allowed to marry your mother. But El Rava, according to Rava, who learns the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, that Rabbi Akiva is learning that she's only usher to you while your wife is alive. The machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel is Oisei V'Shtein means it's only going to be usher if they're both together. Only if the wife and the mother are alive at the same time, only there is there a chiyuv shreifa, but otherwise not. So Rabbi Akiva, based on Rabba's understanding, has an innovative psak that there is no isser shreifa on the mother-in-law if the wife is not alive. No, that would be a perfect example to include in our Mishnah, Listni Nami Chamaisai. It is Oisei V'Esed. Oisei V'Shtein. So Rabbi Akiva Darshan Shtein means there's only an Isser on her if they're both alive. That's what Rabbi Akiva Darshan the bus. So Omer Lei, you're right. We have proven that according to Rava, Rabbi Akiva holds that there's no chiv shreifa if you live with your mother-in-law after your wife died. Nehida miyat tekram shreifa, just because the Torah said there's no chiv shreifa for such a union, meisura miyat tekra, a mitzvah is nish. A mitzvah it's not. It's an avaida, right? So therefore, avada, that wouldn't have been a good example of what we should include in the Mishnah. In fact, why doesn't the woman become usher to her husband? Why doesn't this woman become usher to her husband? Because he was mezana with his wife's sister. Why being mezana with your wife's sister? Why should that usher you to your wife? Just like a woman who lived with another man, she becomes usher to her husband to let him become usher to his wife because he slept with this woman who he wasn't allowed to. Right. So his wife who slept with somebody else, she would be usher to midai raisa because she's an Eish. Even though it was shagi because there were Edom who allowed it to do it, his exer shall be usher to her husband. But your wife's sister, even if you've been amazed slept with your wife's sister, you're mechayev karis, you're still not usher on your wife. So therefore, you slept with your wife's sister, thinking your wife died. There's no gzera, and avada, she's mutter to you. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. B'ez Hashem.